Welcome to Worldview Matters, discussing controversial issues, discerning current events, defending biblical Christianity. No topic off limits. And now, here's your host, David Fiorazo.
No topic off limits is right. And there are new topics that we didn't even think we'd be talking about, like tech, AI, and today, The New Economics of Technocracy, a brand new book from Patrick Wood. We'll get to that in a minute. I want to announce that we have almost all the sessions up on the YouTube channel for the Worldview Matters Conference. If you'd like to check that out, please go to YouTube and Worldview Matters David Fiorazo. That's a separate YouTube than my own personal channel, and that's where all the conference sessions from most of the speakers, except for Elijah Abraham, we can't put him up for security purposes. So everyone else is up there, WvMd&x and all the others. It was just a phenomenal conference, so we're so blessed. So go check those out. They're free. You can watch and listen at your leisure. So today, a brand new book, and this is really crazy that we're talking more and more about this. I was watching a roundtable last night, and these gentlemen had my head spinning. And Patrick Wood was a part of that. The website, technocracy.news. Brother, thanks for coming back on the podcast. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Good to see you too.
Yeah, I was amazed you guys cut it off at 2 hours last night. And you could have kept going.
How'd that happen? I don't know. We usually go 2.5 hours.
Wow. So, all right, Pat. So this book, you've been studying this for a long, long time, but I want to ask you where you want to start. But to me, the natural is really chapter 1, the Technocracy study course of 1934. And it's interesting to me because that's almost at the 100-year anniversary. We're in 2026. You know, it's going to be 2034 before we know it, if Jesus doesn't return first. So do you want to start there? Or do you want to set this up for us?
Well, technocracy is a very old ideology. It's an economic system that was created in 1932 at Columbia University. Then it morphed out of that and into the technocracy study course. But it was a system set up to replace capitalism and free market economics. And it was totally radical at the time. It was more radical even than communism. By the way, the communists hated the technocrats in the 30s and 40s. And vice versa, for a good reason. But technocrats wanted to get rid of the political system altogether. In other words, dismiss all the politicians in society. And they wanted to create an energy script, kind of like a universal basic income, where everybody would give a stipend, and they would work at the instance of the state or the technocrats. And it's crazy, absolutely insane. But you see the same things happening today with the talk about all the energy issues, the talk about UBI, universal basic income. You know, it's crazy. Management of all the resources. Yep, it's the same thing. So today, nobody hardly sees this. They can't connect the dots, apparently, from 90 years ago. They should, but they don't. So here we are. I've been trailing this for a long time now, almost 15 years.
Yep, and you can get Patrick's books, go to Amazon or technocracy.news. So did you say, I mean, it sounds like it's all about control, but what were they looking at doing back before the internet, before all the technological advances? This is 90 years back plus. So what was the plan? What were they looking at implementing?
Well, they wanted to create an economic system that would manage all the resources in society. You would not have any private property or sovereign property, we call it today. And you would be given, they call it a certificate of distribution from birth to death. That was it. And in their mind, scientists and engineers, they figured, well, we understand the science, we understand the engineering, whatever. So if science says to do certain things, then you have to do that. And of course, they became the priesthood of the science, as they say. So they figured, well, we don't need politicians. What's to discuss? We'll tell you what you have to do, and you just go do it. This is not the American way, by the way. We know that. You can't pull that stuff on us. But the American people saw through it. By the end of 1940s, in any case, they ditched the whole thing until it came back with Zbigniew Brzezinski and David Rockefeller at the Trilateral Commission, when they said we're gonna create a new international economic order. They didn't say we're going to base it on technocracy, but we know now exactly what it was.
Wow.
and here we are today.
Wow. So the Technocracy study course, that was an actual course that you could take in the 1930s?
It was their book. That was their Bible.
Oh, it was a
the
book.
Study course. They used that in every meeting across the country. They had study sessions that met every day, every week. And, oddly enough, in Grange halls across the country. You remember the old Grange network where the government built these little buildings around the prairies and whatever in the cities. And so that's where they held most of their meetings, was in the Grange buildings. But this was the study course, was the textbook, if you will, for them to study.
Okay, so let's talk about the subtitle, or the second part of your title, that you will own nothing. I first heard of this around 2016, World Economic Forum, and then the video, promoting, their agenda and making it look good, like desirable for all of us, mouth breathers. And you say it was always about redefinition. It was never about confiscation. Could you explain that?
Yes, the concept of private property is morphed. In other words, the public opinion, public perception of private property is morphed as well. And at this point, what we used to think, us old schoolers, right? We used to think of private property like you own a home and your car and maybe some property, maybe business. That's private property as well. This whole thing has been redefined at this point, where private property is morphing into a user permission now to rent stuff on a pay-per-view, or leasing something. And the idea, what they're saying is, well, you'll be released from the responsibility of owning something, fixing it, et cetera, keeping it up, and we'll do that for you, and then you just lease it from us, and you'll be happy. That's what they say. So at this point, we see the transfer of ownership is going from sovereign property into something different now, based on tokenization mostly, where you'll have user rights to an asset, but you won't own it in the sovereign property aspect.
Okay, so by the way, I didn't mention the book is on Amazon. I don't think I mentioned that, but it's also, of course, you can get the link at technocracy.news. Just came out in the last couple months, already a #1 bestseller in commerce. And let's get back to a few basics here, Patrick Wood. And for those in our audience, the listeners or viewers that are trying to keep up with this and understand it, let's define a few terms. And one would be tokenized assets, and then fractional tokenization. Could you please explain that?
Oh boy, hardly in 20 minutes.
Okay.
but let me put it to you this way.
Okay.
The concept of tokenization is to split an asset into multiple parts, maybe 1,000 parts, 1,000,000 parts. It doesn't matter how many parts there are. But the idea is to sell those fractional shares to somebody around the world. It doesn't matter who that is. Anybody, like could be somebody in Europe, for instance. So when fractional shares are created, this is the tokens we're talking about. They exist on the blockchain. That's a permanent and transparent record of the transaction in the first place. And when you own a token, if you bought one, say a building, something or somewhere, and you have a dividend paid to you for your token or whatever, this is what they say now. You have private property in your hands. You have a share of that building, but you really don't have the share of the building. You can't eat the building. You can't live in it. You can't improve it. You can't loan to get money. You can't get a loan on it. So what are they talking about? Private property. The tokenization removes the asset, whatever it might be, from the private property sector altogether, and it spreads the parts of it around the world. We theorized 6 months ago even what that would mean, what that would look like. Then just a few weeks ago, the New York Stock Exchange came out and said, we're going to tokenize all the stocks on the New York Stock Exchange, over $17 trillion of assets that are going to be tokenized. What? I mean, from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds.
Wow.
It's like unbelievable. So now it's in your face everywhere. It's not just me talking about it like 6 months ago, trying to tell people this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. Now it's come, and everybody's still scratching their head. What have they just done to tokenize the entire stock market? Well, the owner of the New York Stock Exchange, they own other stock exchanges around the world, and they're going to tokenize them as well. Then you have Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, member of the Trilateral Commission, by the way. He's also the co-head of the World Economic Forum currently. A big wig, right?
Jeez.
He said multiple times in public venues, he said anything that can be tokenized will be tokenized. Okay, what does that mean? That, well, all the buildings, all the businesses, all the income streams, the stocks, the bonds, whatever, if it can be tokenized, will be tokenized. That's exactly what he said. What does this mean for society at this point? Well, this will be the removal of ownership rights for anybody who gets into the system, if you will, to be part of the tokenized economy. At this point, you're going to be part of it. There's no other alternative at this point. They're not offering an option. They're not offering a consent form. They're not giving you an opt out like you had if you had during COVID. At least you had an opportunity to protest and get an exemption from your employer to not take the shot. So that's not on the table at all now.
Wow. So, for example, people that own a home, I mean, how can you tokenize something that is not theirs? They're just going to abuse their authority and just say, all right, how is that going to work?
Well, here's what's already happened. You might remember since the last financial meltdown that ended 2010, BlackRock and other companies like that who had boatloads of cash, they came around the country and they bought homes off the market and they turned them into rentals, right? So now they have these huge inventory of rental houses, and you'll never see the market again on those homes. That they're going to be off the market forever as rental homes. Those houses have already been tokenized and spread around the world. So every time somebody gets a cash offer like that from a big, you don't really know who's behind it necessarily, but when a house is put into the token realm, if you will, at that point, it's added to the portfolio, the income stream that comes out because rent is paid. That's distributed to the shareholders, the token holders around the world. And you don't know who owns that house at that point. At least you're renting the house now. You might say, well, they gave you the right to rent back from them. Okay, you say, well, that's a cool thing. I got all these tokens, and they bought my mortgage, they bought my equity, and gave me lots of tokens. I'm rich in tokens now. I can spend them on stuff. But you've transferred your sovereign property into their hands, and you'll be a renter forevermore. That's the problem. This is what they want.
Wow.
This is exactly the scheme.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. We're going to take a brief pause. When we come back, the next question is going to be about Gaza, because that's chapter 6 in your book. And you call it the prototype, and you say it is the proof of concept template for full spectrum technocratic governance. So we'll talk about Gaza in just a minute. But right now, I want to remind everybody that Freedom Project Academy is enrolling students for the fall. For 16 years, FPA has delivered a fully accredited classical online education rooted firmly in Judeo-Christian values. For kids in pre-K through high school, they offer live, anytime, and homeschool courses to fit your child's needs. So all you need to do is visit freedomforschool.com and save 10% when you use the code DAVID. Again, use the code DAVID to save 10% on tuition on all courses at Freedom Project Academy. Again, the website freedomforschool.com to get started. Okay, Gaza. Patrick, you call it a template or the prototype. Can you explain that? Because most people now, Gaza's been in the news quite a bit in the last several years. So explain what you're describing in your book.
Well, this is stranger than fiction. It's documented in my book. However, I can't. I don't make any excuses for it. It's there in black and white. Okay, this is what happened when the World Economic Forum met earlier this year, and lots of speeches were made, empty ones mostly. But President Trump stood up and said, "I'm going to form this board of peace that's going to kind of replace the United Nations and peacekeeping stuff, and where the United Nations has failed to maintain peace, we're going to do it." He said, "I'm going to be the chairman for life on the board of peace, not as president of the United States, but as a private citizen." And he said, we'll have board members, and anybody who wants to join the Board of Peace, $1 billion will be the price tag to join. And so he said, our first project is going to be Gaza. And so he went into Gaza to provide the governance layer, if you will. And that meant that there will be an authority set over Gaza. It won't be Hamas. It won't be the Palestinian Authority. It'll be the Board of Peace. And then he had a financial company called World Liberty Financial that is involved in tokenization. There you go, tokenization, and asset tokenization as well as payment tokenization. Well, his financial company came in to provide the financial layer for Gaza. They're talking about how great it's going to be to have everybody's going to have a wallet, electronic wallet, and they're going to get the USD1 tokens deposited when they do work, whatever. And so the financial layer is being interposed. Then he proposed to create a peacekeeping force comprised of 20,000 troops, 5,000 per country, from Islamic countries, no Western countries, but Islamic countries. This 20,000 Muslim force will be brought into Gaza, and they'll be under the command, however, of a U.S. general attached to CENTCOM. That's one of the agencies in the military. And so you have all of a sudden you have the military, or the police force, the enforcement arm attached to the whole project. Well, this is all under a combination of President Trump as president and President Trump as a civilian. So we've never seen this in the history of the world, and unless in our country, nobody's ever done this before. So he's laid claim to Gaza at this point, and he wants to turn it into a series of smart cities. The architecture, the build out, the plans, and they're all in plain view at this point, and they were architected by none other than his son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
Wow.
You can't, like I said, you can't make this up. This is a family operation all of a sudden showing up in Gaza to do this. Well, he wanted to turn this into the Riviera of the Mediterranean. Well, it just so happens there's a new trade corridor being erected right now called IMEC, IMMEC. That's the India, Middle East trade corridor. It's going to be the biggest thing I think the world has ever seen before, but it just happens to be passing right in front of Gaza on the Mediterranean. And the deep water port of Haifa is 93 kilometers to the north of Gaza, and it'll be receiving traffic that then forwarded into Greece, Italy, and on to Europe. So Trump has an idea to be a recipient of all the wealth passing through this corridor, trade corridor, and you can see the art of the deal here. He's made a situation now, and they're calling this greenfield construction or greenfield application, whatever. Greenfield means you're starting with nothing, just bare ground. But in Gaza's case, you're not just starting with bare ground. You have 1.4 million people at your disposal to be the citizens of your country. So when Jared Kushner stood up in the World Economic Forum, when the Board of Peace was created, he made a statement that said, we're going to rule in Gaza, we're going to rule it with a committee of technocrats. He used that word.
He said that?
Technocratic leadership.
Wow.
And so, sure enough, the people showed up, and they were calling them technocrats. And well, how can you reconcile this? This blows America's minds at this point.
Yeah.
A president can't serve two masters, but he is right now.
Wow.
So this is what I'm positing is this is the architecture for further development of the technocratic world society.
Yeah, you dedicate 2 chapters in your book, 13 chapters in the book, and 2 of them are on the Gulf corridor. You just explained chapter 9. Chapter 2, you talk about the $2 trillion in deals and the privatization of American infrastructure. There's so much. This goes so deep, and I think this was hardly on many of our radars, right? Our radar screens, but it is now.
You're right.
They're using the language now. Do you ever feel like justified by saying "I told you so"? After all these decades, you've been warning about this.
I do. I have this fleeting thought. I told you so. I told you to. I could say it in my sleep, but it doesn't help the situation.
No.
That's the problem.
No,
Americans have been slow to accept this in the first place. Yeah. That there's another force that's been injected, a fourth column, if you will, or a fifth column in society. Nobody saw it coming, but here they are. They're in plain sight right now, and they're getting away with. Well, not murder, but you get my point. They're getting ready with anything they wanted to do because they're moving so fast, nobody can catch them at this point. This is the problem. When acceleration takes over the whole scenario, the laws can't touch them because there are no laws. You can't make them fast enough, and the society otherwise the resistance, they can't catch them either. They're moving forward at breakneck speed.
Yeah.
And this is what we get now.
So 3 minutes left, Patrick. I knew this would go by very fast, and you've done a pretty good job of trying to condense some of this for us. Chapter 13 is what will the world look like? And you talked about the architecture is dangerous because it is designed to move faster than accountability can follow. That's very interesting. Talk to us a little bit about that before we wrap it up.
I will. Mark Andreessen, one of the founders of the internet world in the first place, he was one of the first inventors of a browser back in 96. He's and not in my opinion, but nevertheless, he's a bigwig in the tech community, and he talks about accelerationism. And accelerationism, we saw this when Mark Zuckerberg said, if you're not moving if you're not breaking things, you're not moving fast enough. And so their idea is to use accelerationism to push the world society to the breaking point where it will shatter in a billion pieces, and then we'll put it back together again. This is like a 52 card pickup with the world. So accelerationism is part of the architecture at this point. They will move faster than they can be held accountable. And this is everywhere you see at this point. Acceleration is a thing. This was, by the way, this is also part of a philosophy called the Dark Enlightenment. We're not going to go into that right now, but that was a very clearly articulated with the Dark Enlightenment. Accelerationism is a feature. If you move fast enough, you can't be caught.
Yeah, it makes sense. Accelerationism, my goodness. And we're going to see more of it, and we won't be able to keep up. But I want to mention again, technocracy.news or Amazon. You can pick up the new economics of technocracy and get so much more in depth than we were able to touch on in this brief podcast with Patrick Wood. Brother, thank you for all you do. We'll, Lord willing, do this again. We'll look for the roundtables and watch as more information comes out, right? Thank you.
You bet. My pleasure.
All right. Thanks, brother. Okay, guys, there's so much more. It was kind of hard to decide what questions to ask, but just getting some information out there for a lot of people who this wasn't even on our radar. So it's hard to keep up with something you never knew was going on, and now we know it's in plain sight. And a lot of these concepts are just being played out right before our eyes. So, friends, we don't need to keep up with everything, but we do need to trust the Lord and not be overwhelmed, because He sees the end from the beginning and He is sovereign. So take that to heart. God bless you, and as always, keep speaking the truth about things that matter. See you next time.